For the first time in my life, I really realized if I don't have my health, mental and physical, I don't have anything.
I'm Jill Angelo, host of the Genneve podcast series for women's health in midlife. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the health and wellness industries. These experts are helping women 40 plus feel confident and in control of their health in the most vibrant years of their lives. So join us on this journey of women's health. As someone who suffers from celiac disease, I'm keenly interested in the causes of inflammation. I recently sat down with Amanda Giralmo, holistic health coach and owner of WellthieLife, to talk about inflammation and how making the right food choices will support our best, healthiest lives, not to mention managing our stress. You had a transformative change in your life and in your health that has brought you to this place of living a healthier you and taking inflammation out of your diet and everything we're going to talk about. So tell us about you, because I want our listeners to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to say, just first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm such a huge fan of everything that you and Genneve do as a company. You guys are amazing. So my journey that got me to where I am today really started several years ago, and I was happily working for a large tech company and kind of plugging along there, and went through a really rough time in my personal life, and went through a divorce of my first husband, and we were together for about 12 years, and I didn't do a very good job of caring for myself while going through that really, really tough time emotionally. And I didn't really take care of myself physically. I didn't take care of myself emotionally. And I kind of just threw myself into my job, and I just worked and worked and worked and worked. And I ended up getting sick. Fortunately, I feel so blessed that it wasn't something that I couldn't come back from, but I ended up really coming to a place where I needed to take a pause, and I needed to put my health first and foremost. And I'm very, very grateful to some family members and to my doctor for actually telling me, you need to take a break from work and you need to focus on yourself. And I did that. And I took 3 months off from work and was so fortunate I had the support in my job to be able to do that. And I took a break, and I really focused on emotional and physical well-being for myself, working with a number of different health practitioners, really focusing on what I was putting into my body, what I was consuming, not only in my mind, but also what I was eating as well. And for the first time in my life, I really realized if I don't have my health, mental and physical, I don't have anything.
Isn't that so true? And did you feel like you needed permission to make that change, or to take the time off to go get into a better place?
Yes, I'm nodding my head as you're speaking. It was really hard. I mean, basically my doctor said, you need to take a break. And my first instinct was, no, I can't. I have all these people depending on me. Who's going to do my job? What is my boss going to do? What's my performance review going to look like? Am I even going to have a job to come back to? So absolutely, it was incredibly hard for me to come to that decision. But what I realized was I didn't have anything to give anybody else anymore, because I wasn't giving to myself.
Yeah. And story of so many women's lives. And thank you for sharing that, because that's deeply personal. But I think the more that we can connect with other women who have made that difficult choice, the more it almost again gives everybody permission to go and do it. So thank you for sharing that. And it's brought you now to being a certified health coach. Is that how you refer to your?
Yes, a certified holistic health coach. So yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Focused on inflammation in the body as a culprit around not feeling your best. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about inflammation. What's going on?
The first thing that I'll start by saying with inflammation, or our body's inflammatory response, is that it's completely normal, and it's actually our body responding in the way that it's supposed to when everything is functioning optimally in our body. So You can't be mad at your body when you've got some inflammation going on.
That's great to hear.
Yep, exactly. Where issues start to arise is when our inflammatory response doesn't get a chance to actually turn off and is constantly triggered. And let me take a little bit of a step back here and just explain this in a bit more detail. And I'm going to try to take something that's a pretty complicated topic and try to simplify it as much as possible. So kind of bear with me here as I explain this a little bit.
That's great. Go for it.
So our immune system, like I said, is an incredibly complicated ecosystem in our body. And about 70% of it actually lives in our gut, believe it or not. And our immune system works hand in hand with our microbiome, which are trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in our body, predominantly in our gut, but on our skin as well. So one role these bacteria play is to help us break down and digest our food, along with keeping our intestinal walls happy and healthy. And we want our intestinal walls to be healthy because they are the skin on the inside of our body, which prevents what we ingest from getting into other parts of our body. And while our immune system helps to protect us from bad bacteria or foreign bodies we ingest, like let's say salmonella, for example. So let's say you're eating a piece of chicken per se, and unfortunately it has a little bit of salmonella on it. Our microbiome works to break down the chicken and helps us digest the good parts of the food, while our immune system triggers the inflammatory response to kill the salmonella and all of, obviously the other unpleasant side effects that come with food poisoning. And once that salmonella is dead and is passed through our body, our immune system turns off the inflammation. So like I said before, that immune response and that inflammation is actually a really good thing for our body.
Yeah. It's like the irritating fire engine siren that happens coming down the street. It's a good thing we have that, even if it's a little irritating at the moment.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let me take us to what happens when things can go a little bit awry and where we need to be a bit concerned about inflammation.
Great.
So when our microbiome gets off balance, and again, those are the trillions of bacteria that are in our body, and it's called dysbiosis, if you've ever heard that term. Dysbiosis is when our bacteria gets off balance. It doesn't break down and digest our food as well as it should. And it also doesn't keep our intestinal walls happy and healthy. And this triggers our immune system to look at certain foods that we consume on a regular basis as foreign bodies and triggers our immune response, creating inflammation. And also, when our food isn't digested as well, it actually can permeate the walls of our intestines. And that can cause something called leaky gut syndrome. And that essentially means that you have little food particles that can float into your bloodstream. And this really turns our immune system on to red alert.
Makes sense. I've been diagnosed with celiac disease for the last 10 years now, and I remember when they diagnosed, they scoped down into my small intestine, and they looked at that layer of kind of almost follicles within the intestine, and they said yours are incredibly striated, so they're damaged, so they're unable to absorb the nutrients out of the food that you need, and instead it was just irritating, and as a result there was some leaky gut syndrome happening because there was just no place for it to go. My body didn't want it, and it was kind of going right through me in a bad leaky sort of way, which is probably TMI, but it's the reality.
It is absolutely the reality, and you're a case in point living example of what can happen when chronic inflammation pops up.
Yeah.
And think about how often we eat. Like, we eat all the time, so every time we're consuming something, it creates that response, and hence the experience that you've been going through, Jill, with the celiac. And it's a really big thing. I mean, it is affecting 50 million people have an autoimmune disease, and I think that's actually a really low number. I think that's a pretty conservative estimate. So we're talking about celiac, MS, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's thyroid. I mean, I think we all know someone that one of those diseases affects. And there's also 15 million people in the US alone that suffer from food allergies. And both of these things, autoimmune and food allergies, are, linked to chronic inflammation. So it's a big thing.
So tell us, how do we know if this is happening to us? Like, are there symptoms, or what do we look for?
The symptoms can vary. And like I said before, anyone with autoimmune disease, allergies, or asthma, in most cases, there is a link to an imbalance in the microbiome, and, chronic inflammation could be going on there. Some of the symptoms to look for, though, are if you have excessive belly fat, you have high blood sugar, digestive issues like gas, diarrhea, constipation, or bloating. If you're tired all the time and you've just got this fatigue and you can't figure out what's going on, skin rashes or problems like eczema, psoriasis, or red blotchy skin is another thing to pay attention to. Are your face and hands puffy? Do you have bags under your eyes, very noticeable puffy bags? Do you have gum disease? That's another thing to pay attention to. And are you suffering from any mood disorders? Is there depression, anxiety, or brain fog that's going on? You just can't think clearly. And again, that's just a list of some of the most common, but there could be others there as well. Anything that just kind of doesn't feel right, pay attention to.
How do we become inflamed? Is it diet or stress or exercise?
So like I said earlier, the inflammation really, pops up when our body's bacteria is off balance. And this can happen in multiple ways, and I'll share quite a few that really affect a large majority of the population, if not all of us, in some way, shape, or form. So one of the ways that starts out from, the day that we arrive on this earth is whether we're born via C-section or not. And if we are a C-section baby, we don't get the opportunity to go through our mother's birth canal and therefore ingest the microbiome that she has in her birth canal. And so from day one, we're actually set up at a disadvantage to not have the bacteria, that we need. Another way that our microbiome can, become off balance is whether our mother chooses to breastfeed us or not. And if we, if we're not breastfed, we're not getting the good bacteria that comes from our mother's breast milk. So that's another thing, and especially in those really formative years when it is so important to develop a really diverse and strong microbiome. Another way that, again, affects all of us, and this one, I definitely happened to me growing up, is being on lots of antibiotics, and especially as a child. I think we all remember the pink stuff that tasted kind of good when we had the ear infections. And, not only does that stuff kill off the bad bacteria, but it also affects the good bacteria, that we need to break down those food particles. Taking lots of over-the-counter pain meds is another one. And, if any of us have had those tough periods and cramps, I mean, I can say myself, I've definitely reached for that ibuprofen, and it's something that a lot of us do. And just consciously, we've got to know that it does mess up a bit with the bacteria, in our body as well. And alcohol, alcohol, I think we probably all know there's not a lot of great
always
things.
The good, the bad, the ugly with alcohol of any kind.
Exactly.
Stress leads to everything. But in this case, and especially in your own personal story, you were under an incredible amount of stress. How did that impact the inflammation in your body?
When stress comes into play, it really gets our sympathetic nervous system all up in a bunch and to be incredibly tight. And it actually prevents us from digesting our food really well, therefore, altering the bacteria in our gut. And when we are in a parasympathetic state, which is what a lot of people refer to as our rest and digest state, that's when our body can actually relax. We can digest our food better. All those little bacteria in our gut are really happy. But when we're in that, sympathetic state, everything is just really tight, and that
Clenched.
bacteria is clenched, and they're not happy, and they're not going to break down your food as well. So that's really, specifically where it plays into the inflammation.
Let's then talk about if the inflammation isn't controlled or reduced, what happens and what can it lead to?
If inflammation isn't addressed, it can really lead to the autoimmune diseases that, we talked about previously. Allergies can develop, asthma can develop, food sensitivities can start to show up as well. And, on the longer term, if someone continuously has chronic inflammation in their body, it can lead to some of the big illnesses and diseases that are out there. Heart disease, cancer, for example.
Wow. So it's a serious thing, and it just
is.
kind of creeps up on you.
Absolutely.
You've talked a little bit about in some of your work around food reactivity versus an allergy. So you've mentioned inflammation can lead to food allergies, and it seems like allergies are on the rise. But what's the difference between an allergy and being reactive or reactivity?
In the theme of inflammation, food reactivity or food sensitivity and an allergy are both signs that chronic inflammation could be occurring in the body. However, an allergy is something that can easily be tested by a blood test, and you can go into, any allergist or even your primary care doctor, and they can usually run an allergy test to identify what you're allergic to. And a lot of allergies can have a very severe reaction when they actually occur. So for example, you can get, an itchy throat that then starts closing that can lead to, your inability to breathe. So that's a pretty severe reaction. When we think about food sensitivity, they kind of creep up on you, and they can be a bit more subtle, and they are harder for doctors to diagnose. And a really simple way to think about food sensitivity is when you eat the food, you don't feel so good. When you stop eating the food, you feel better.
That's, pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
And does this become more, can inflammation and or reactivity creep up more as we age? Does aging have anything to do with this process?
Yes, it actually does. And, changes in our hormones, especially for women in and around menopause, can lead to increased inflammation. And it's thought that before menopause, the balance of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone actually have a calming effect on inflammation. And we don't know exactly how that works yet. Our hormones are so incredibly complicated that we're not quite sure how that happens. But we do know that symptoms of chronic inflammation often become more apparent during and after menopause.
Fascinating. And so this message is even more important to women in kind of midlife and menopause as their estrogen, but all of their hormones are changing.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's get to the solution. You in particular, this is an area, obviously, because you were personally impacted. You've developed a 3-phase program for your clients to help eliminate. Tell us a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 3-phase program that I developed starts with the first phase being a 21-day elimination diet. And essentially what we do is we focus on eliminating all of the, general inflammatory foods, and there is a list of them out there, along with anything that you have a suspicion is causing issues for you. And this is really the most challenging part for people. And it is hard. I've done it myself. It is a challenge. And what I provide for my clients is I give them a list of all of the foods that they can and cannot eat. I provide them weekly meal plans, recipes, and shopping lists for those 21 days. So just really trying to make it as easy for them as possible. I also provide supplements for them, along with just other helpful tips just to help their body detox and start to regain balance. Once we get through the first phase, then we move into phase 2, which is all about retesting a specific subset of food to see if it's actually causing a reaction in your body. And, I provide my clients with really detailed instructions on how to do these food testing, along with the symptoms to look for, because they really run the gamut, along with tracking sheets just for them to help, keep track, because it can be, like I said, a wide variety of things. And then I really provide that personal support along the journey, just checking in with them. And then finally, once we get to phase 3, I provide the customized plan that's complete with supplements and foods to include and avoid to help your gut heal and really prevent any further inflammation. And, it's really recommended that those foods that came up that cause the reactivity, to really keep them out of your diet for probably about 6 months to 2 years in some cases before retesting, to really allow your gut to heal.
And this program, it's not like something you start and stop. Like the elimination phase is 3 weeks, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then the second phase where you're testing it out, re-entering some things, how long does that last?
So it can go anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, and it is all dependent upon whether you have a reaction or not. Because when your body reacts to one of the foods that we're testing, we need to give it some time for all of the symptoms to alleviate before we start testing another food. So the duration for that is really dependent on the individual need there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the amount of sensitivity that a person has.
Exactly. And
then the third phase is kind of life as usual, or this is the new life, at least for 6 months to 2 years,
yes,
where you might re-enter. But this is a life change. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. Tell us about customers or clients, I should say, that have experienced some pretty significant impacts and that have been able to, because it's not like you start it and then, I cheated, and you've kind of got to start that whole elimination phase over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, I just had a client recently who completed, just the 21-day elimination portion. And before we started, she felt sluggish all the time, fatigue all the time. She had issues with constipation, with bloating. She struggled with major anxiety, and she was not happy with her weight at all. She'd gained a significant amount of weight over the last few years. And in completing the elimination portion, she came back to me, after the 21 days, and I could see it in her face. She just had this glow in her skin. And she's like, oh my gosh, I have all this boundless energy. I had no idea I could feel so great. I didn't even realize that I felt this bad before. Like, I didn't understand the magnitude of it. Her bloating went away. Her elimination returned to normal. She lost 13 pounds in the 21 days. And her anxiety really, really subsided. She just said, I really just feel this inner calm and peace that I've really never experienced before. And another, if those aren't, enough wonderful things, she learned how to read labels and start cooking really for the first time in her life. And she said it was so much easier than she thought, and so worth the benefit. And man, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah, you see such a transformation in people.
Mm-hmm.
The skin brightness alone, I think, is just pretty amazing, in the look in someone's eyes.
Yeah, I could just see it when she walked in. I said, man, you just have this glow about your skin. You look amazing.
Was it hard for her?
She struggled, yeah. There were some challenging days and some times, but I was there for her to answer. We texted back and forth a lot on, she would send me labels of certain foods. Can I have this? Is this on the plan? Can I do this? Is this? So, we went back and forth a lot, but she's like, I learned so much. I can't unlearn this. Now I know this. I'm empowered for the rest of my life to know what I need to eat to be healthy.
Yeah. And I think your role that you play in that, you're obviously kind of the trainer. You provide the plan, but then also you're this immense support, and you're probably keeping your clients honest in some sort of way. Do they ever feel like they need to apologize to you?
They do sometimes. Yeah.
Or they've snuck something.
They do. It's funny. I mean, someone will come in and, sorry, I did this or I didn't. And, to me, it's not about apologizing to me. I am just here to play support and accountability. It's all about, what they need to do for themselves. Yeah. So, but yes, they do apologize from time to time.
Amanda, how do clients or how do people find you? Because you work with men and women.
Yes.
Of all ages. So how do people find you, and when do they finally find you? Like, when do they come to you?
Yeah. So, you can find me by going to my website. It's really simple. It's WellthieLife.com. And I'm sure, I can provide a link for you guys to put in the notes. So really easy. The best way to start the process with me is to schedule a health consultation, and it's complimentary, and it's 50 minutes, and we just sit down and we talk about what are your health concerns, what are your goals. I share a little bit about my program, and we just see if it's a good fit. So it's just a really easy, no pressure way to just start the conversation. And I would say, when is it a good time, or when are you ready? It's when you kind of hit that point where you're going, I want to be healthier. I want to feel better. Something just feels off. I'm not sure what to do about it, but I want some help. And my role is I'm a supportive mentor. I want to walk this journey of discovery with you. I'm not here to do the work for you, but man, I'm going to be there to support you and give you tips and tricks and suggestions and recommendations along the way, and hold you accountable too.
Yeah. Well, and having gone through that, you know how hard it can be and the discipline it requires.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing this bit of what you do and what you've learned about yourself and what you're bringing to other men and women out there. And I hope more and more people can benefit from this because I think it's amazing what you do bring to them. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. It's such a pleasure working with you. So thank you.
Stay tuned for our next podcast, where I'll be talking with Dr. Lorna Marshall of Pacific Northwest Fertility on egg preservation and the choices women have for family planning.
Thanks for listening to the Genneve podcast series. We welcome your feedback at genneve.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The Genneve podcast series is produced by Shannon Perry, theme music by Smitty. And until next time, watch the Genneve website for new stories and offers all dedicated to women's midlife health.